I mean, this happened. The top of the food chain, the global food chain, was essentially decapitated simultaneous with this transition out of the ice. And what I mean by that is essentially the other, let's assume humans for the moment are the top of the food chain. Then what are we going to have underneath us? We're going to have the large predators. Then under the large predators are going to be the large herbivores. And what we see is that globally, 3/4 of the large predators and large herbivores disappeared at 12,000 years ago. And as far as paleontologists are able to tell, that disappearance of species was the most severe that this planet has suffered in perhaps as much as 5 million years. Definitely the most severe effects on the animal life of the planet in 3 million years. It just depends on how. There was two events. There was a 3 million year event and there was a 5 million year event. Which one of those turns out to be equal or to exceed the event of 12,000 years ago is yet to be determined, because the count of species loss is not completed yet. But at least 3 million and probably 5 million years is how far you'd have to go back on planet Earth to find an effect as severe on at least on the large animal life of the planet as what happened 12,000 years ago. And as I've said repeatedly in here, the dominant theory as to what happened is what? Human predation. Human predation. And we're supposed to believe that human beings hunted to extinction 75% of all the large animals. And when we say large animals, we define those as any animal that's about 100 pounds in body weight or more. This is Fluffy. I was so attached to him I had him stuffed when he passed away.
Now is that bigger than the modern elephant?
No, it's about the same size as a modern elephant. And why do I have this guy? What species is this? This is a mastodon, and I like to show a mastodon first because mastodons were very prolific right around here. In fact, right here where Sam's house is, there may have been herds of mastodons grazing 13,000 years ago. So yeah, I mean, it's possible you could dig up some fossilized mammoth mastodon poop. Yep, so we had mastodons here. What else did we have? American mastodon. Now here, you'll see this was Mammoth americanum, the scientific term. He existed from approximately 5 million years before present to 12,000 years before present. 12,000 years ago, these mastodons had been around for 5 million years in North America. Boom, overnight they were gone. Now at this point, I haven't seen any paleontologists putting forward the idea that they were hunted to extinction. Mammoths, yes. Mastodons, no. In fact, the main theory I've seen, the only real theory that addresses the extinction of the mastodons, is a rather peculiar one. He says that during the Ice Age, as you know, there were spruce trees growing in the southern United States, where the mastodons lived. And mastodons like to browse on spruce trees. Well, when the climate warmed at the end of the last Ice Age, the spruce trees migrated to the north, which is where you find spruce trees now, up, Great Lakes and all up in Canada and stuff. The spruce trees migrated north, and pine trees took over. And apparently the mastodons weren't able to navigate their way through all of these new pine trees to find the spruce trees, and they all starved to death. Yeah, that was the theory. Yes, and I've never seen any alternative theory. I mean, that was like 30 years ago they put forward. I think that was a 70s theory, and I don't think anybody's ever really challenged it.
It would be interesting to know what they was drinking while they come up with that, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And, well, this was a troglodyte, one of the local indigenous. No, this is just for scale,
He get his hat, that's what I want to know. He needs 2 of them.
Well, he got that because when he joined the Gilligan fan club, they send a free hat. Smilodon. Now this is one of the really cool guys that lived here in Georgia with his big old incisors, those front incisors. Now notice that he existed from 2 million years to when? The youngest fossils, 12,000 years. So he disappeared at the same time the mastodons did. He was about the size of a modern lion, but his body mass was somewhat heavier.
Is that in the U.S.?
Yeah. I mean, he was all over the U.S. and Europe, but saber-tooth cats were very abundant here in the southeastern United States. All over, they found all over unglaciated, lower continental United States. These guys were prevalent. You know, many of these remains have been found in the La Brea tar pits out in Los Angeles. But yeah, they've been found in Georgia, they've been found in Alabama, they've been found in Tennessee, their remains, they've been found in caves in Missouri.
Back when I was growing up as a boy, they referred to him as the Saber-Tooth Cats.
Yeah, and they kind of got away from that. I think kind of the same deal as like why there's, we don't say Brontosaurus anymore because I think, they say taxonomically is the word. Taxonomically, they're not really, they're more closely akin to modern house cats than they are tigers, believe it or not. Are you saying that we should get back to the old days and call them saber-tooth tigers? Well, I call them Smilodons now because I want to be cool and scientific. I use that term, Smilodon. Just like this is Ursus Spalaeus, the giant cave bear. Now this guy would have been something to encounter him out in the woods strolling. Now when you go strolling out in the woods now, up there by Helen or whatever, you don't have to worry about running into Ursus Spalaeus. But 13,000 years ago, and probably back at least 1 million years ago, you becoming this lunch for Ursus Spalaeus might have not been out of the question. Those bears there would get up to, they were bigger than grizzlies. Bigger than grizzlies. They may have been, let's see here. Maybe we can put in something for scale. There we go. There we go. You can see how big look at the size of that bear's head. His shoulder, the bear's shoulder was, in some cases, a large Ursus Spalaeus was over 6 feet high. That's a big bear. You wouldn't last long.
You got a picture of Bigfoot?
I have a picture of Gigantopithecus, but not in this one. Okay.
I thought maybe that's what you were leading up to.
Here's just another rendition of the Ursus Spalaeus. And notice that Ursus Spalaeus, also Ursus, right? That's bear, right? We all know Ursa. Ursa Major, the great bear. And Ursus Spalaeus. Spalaeus is what? You heard of spelunker? What does Spalaeus mean? Cave, yeah. Now here's the bizarre thing. There's a place in Europe, and I actually brought this up before, and I promised to verify and document the source, which I've forgotten to do. This is one of the most bizarre stories I've ever heard of in the annals of paleontological discovery. There is somewhere perhaps what is now modern Czechoslovakia, I think, there is a cave where when they excavated it in the late 1800s and up through the first several decades of the 1900s, they uncovered and identified the remains of over 30,000 of these bears in one cave. And they, of course, had no explanation for that, other than it must have been, bears, that must have been Ursus Spalaeus Central for hundreds of thousands of years.
They did a lot of fornicating in there, too.
But that's a lot of damn bears. Well, unless it was a catastrophe and something. In fact, there are modern examples of like forest fires and great storms and stuff, animals taking refuge in caves. What? 30,000, yeah, 30,000. In one cave, And I know it must have been. I will try to remember to bring, I've got the original article when it was published. And they were just scratching their heads. And since then, we probably would have means of dating those remains to see how big of a spread there is. But I have never seen anybody going back to that. And I mean, this was, 75 years ago or so. Then there was this guy, Megaloceros, the giant Irish elk, and he's being chased by dire wolves. Now, we didn't have the giant elk here in the southeast, at least as far as I know, one was never found. They were mostly a European species. We did, however, have a giant moose, an extinct species of moose that was as big as this guy. These dire wolves were very massive creatures, on average about 150 pounds. Some of them may have been 200 pounds. I think I've got a figure in here for scale again. Yeah, this guy gets around. Crocodile hunter had nothing on this guy. This is a correct scale to the Megaloceros, the giant Irish elk. Their shoulders were up to 8 feet. And if you look at the size of that wolf that's bearing down on him, there's an interesting, well, yeah, I mean, that could be a 200-pound wolf right there. One of the things that zoologists mammalian zoologists had puzzled over, I actually remember reading a couple of articles on it, was the fact that, modern mountain lions run from dogs. When they're hunting mountain lions, they'll use dogs, and mountain lions run up in trees, and dogs, even small dogs, 50-pound dogs can tree a cougar. Yeah.
Why?
Well, that was what they were asking. Why is that? And they think it's probably an ancestral memory because those little dogs are reminding them of these guys. And these guys were apparently, their jaw bones were about twice as heavy as a modern timber wolf. So they had the ability, probably could just, in one bite, crush your skull in between their jaws. So once again, we don't have to worry about packs of dire wolves breathing down our neck when we go out to enjoy nature. But for most of the time that humans have lived on this planet, we have lived cohabitated with dire wolves and with cave bears and with saber-tooth cats. And with this guy here, this is the American Pleistocene lion. Now it's interesting because this guy here, you can see he's taken down a Pleistocene horse, which of course, when the Europeans arrived in North America, there were no more horses. But during the Pleistocene, there were horses. In fact, I've read that some of these horses stood 15 to 17 hands high, which were huge horses. Well, notice this lion. This lion is the size of that horse. This was a lion whose large specimens may have been more than 50% greater than the largest modern male African lion. And these guys, American Pleistocene lion, Panthera atrox, he was a prevalent animal in North America during the Ice Age. And then there was Mammoths trogontherii.
How much bigger are they from the other?
These guys are huge, and I think we've got a little person in there somewhere, yes.
Who is that?
It's just a human figure for scale, so you can see how big these guys were. And they were about another 6 feet taller at shoulders than modern African elephants. In fact, here's the thing. Modern Africa has one species of elephant. Ice Age North America had 4 species of elephants. And they were as abundant as elephants in Africa. There were millions of them.
Now, were these kind of vicious creatures, or?
I don't know. We don't know that much about their lifestyles. They may have been, it's just hard to say. They didn't need to be vicious because, who's going to mess with that? Unless it's a cave bear. Oh, but the most formidable predator of all was the giant short-faced bear, which I think I've got a slide of him coming up. Oh yeah, there's that's just to show you the size of a mammoth thigh bone. Yeah, we were just exploring one day and dug that up in North Georgia.
Yeah, you could throw that to the dire wolf and it'd be happy.
Yeah. Then here was the woolly mammoth, the Mammoths primigenius. This was, as it says, their icon of the Ice Age. Went extinct at the Pleistocene-Holocene boundary circa 12,000. Now, every animal species that we've seen up here, and how many have we seen now, 8 or 10? Went extinct around the same time. What we've seen is the number of species of large mammal that went extinct worldwide around 12,000 years ago. The total number is around 130 species. Now, we've seen however many here, maybe 8. 130 species worldwide. That's what I mean by the top of the food chain was decapitated, largely. And then finally, Mammothus imperator. So these were the 4 species of elephants. You had Mammothus imperator, Mammothus primigenius, you had the Mammothus trogontherii, and then you had mastodons. So 4 species of what would be called proboscidean. Now this, Elasmotherium sibericum, may have probably did range into Alaska. No species of this guy have been found south of the ice sheet, though. But this was a extinction uncertain, probably circa 12,000 years BP. They have to find a few more specimens, but give you an idea of how big this guy was. This is not actually the woolly rhinoceros. The woolly rhinoceros is the next one. This was another species of rhinoceros. And by putting this human figure in here, you can see how big they were. They were they were the size of a modern-day African elephant, Elasmotherium sibericum. Okay, Coelodonta. This is your famous woolly rhinoceros. And again, extinction 12,000 years before present. And Arctodus simus, that's the giant short-faced bear, 1,400 plus pounds. There were perhaps as big as a ton. Some of the big ones may have weighed a ton. And they guessed that they could run probably 40 to 50 miles an hour because they had very long legs. And the way their eyes were situated on their head, zoological anatomists could tell that they were designed for hunting and running after their prey and taking down their prey by running them down. These are just some of the, Ursus maritimus tyrannicus. That was the giant polar bear, and that was another 1,500-pound bear that's extinct. Castoroides, the giant beaver, they lived here in Georgia. They were a Georgia southeast specimen. Yeah, size of a big bear. The Glyptodon was the giant armadillo. Megalonyx, the giant ground sloth. Nothrotheriops. Then there was the Jefferson ground sloth. Okay, here's a painting showing the Smilodon stalking a Shasta ground sloth. Oh yeah, and then bison latifrons, the super bison, and for scale, I'll put that guy in there, that intrepid explorer, and it gives you an idea of how big they were. Their horns could get up to 6 feet in length. So compare that with the modern bison. I don't know if you have ever been up close to a modern bison. They're pretty darn impressive when you're standing a couple of feet away from one. And this guy, can you imagine meeting this guy face to face?
Now, could gravity be heavier or lighter, and it make the creature smaller or bigger? You know what I mean?
No, I don't think that was it. Okay, Megatherium americanum, the giant ground sloth. Now again, this guy here went extinct at 12,000 years ago. This guy, the Megatherium americanum, and you can see how big they were. They were here in Georgia. So you're starting to get the idea, I hope, that during the last ice age, this was a pretty radically different place. And of course, now the other interesting question is were there people here? And there almost certainly were. I mean, with that new site found down in South Carolina that perhaps has human artifacts going back 50,000 years, I think that's highly likely. And once we begin to understand the nature of the catastrophe at 12,000 years ago, it becomes clear why there's not a whole lot of evidence for what people were doing here prior to 12,000 years ago. Woolly mammoths have been found, quite a few of them have been found at the mouth of the Savannah River, interestingly, down there and off of the Atlantic coastal plain, under the ocean. Well, during the Ice Age, this was an area, the climate here would have been like northern Minnesota. Same kind of vegetation, winters with heavy snowfalls, But warm summers. There would have been warm summers. It was not at all like it is now. It was definitely colder. Glyptodonts, these were the giant armadillos. Oh, they were 500-600 pounds. Diornis maximus, well, we're going to speed on here. Now, this was not a Pleistocene bird. This was a Miocene bird. But this was, I like this guy because he was one of the baddest ass birds that ever lived. And let's see, let's put a person in there so you can see. They could run, I guess, 60 to 70 miles an hour. In fact, those birds, during the Miocene, those giant birds were the top of the food chain. And then there was a catastrophe. The giant birds got wiped out, and new species came along in the Pliocene and replaced them. So here's a scene that could have been typical of Sam's backyard during the late Pleistocene. Woolly mammoths just trying to get a drink of water and stirring up a nest of Smilodons. And this is something we've covered, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, although we certainly didn't cover it in the thoroughness that it warrants, because basically we're talking about getting to the bottom of the greatest catastrophe, not only to engulf this planet since we humans have been here, but of the greatest catastrophe of the last 5 million years.